Dr. Frankenstein was in the back of my mind the entire time when I was trying to think up this story. This kind of mad scientist, this mad doctor who's trying to develop the perfect cure.
Everybody, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have a very, very smart gentleman on the call today for our podcast. I'm excited to have him here. And he's an author. He has books out in the world, and again, like I said, he's like a super smart guy. Let's call him like the Bill Nye of everything to do with authorship. How about that? I love that. But I have Jordan on the podcast today. Excited to have him here, and he's part of the great community of authors over at Blue Handle Publishing. We've had many of the great authors on from them. We love those guys over there. So, Jordan, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. Glad to have you here.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Excellent. Tell everybody where you are, Jordan, in this big world of ours.
I live in Texas. I live in what is considered West Texas. If you look at a map, that's the most northern part. That's just how they name it. I live about an hour north of Amarillo, if anyone's familiar with the old country song, Amarillo by Daylight.
There you go.
About an hour north of there.
Is this your home? Like you born there and as well in Texas?
I wasn't born in Texas, but both my parents are from Texas.
Okay, there you go.
My dad was in the military, and this is where it gets weird. I was born legally in Tennessee, but the military base is in Kentucky. It was on a state line. Post office on one side, hospital on the other.
Well, there you go. That's good. That's a good story. I like that. That's amazing. Okay, so your journey, Jordan, as an author, how did all this begin with? You are in teaching, you help students. That's kind of your background. You are super smart in that regard. Where's the idea of writing a book? Where does that come from?
Growing up, I always kind of collected family stories. There's all sorts of family stories that were just kind of hanging out there, and I picked them up one by one, learned them, and were able to retell them. Such thing as like the joking family curse and stuff like that, to kind of how the family got to the Texas Panhandle. And as a young kid, I just enjoyed stories. And as I got older in middle school, I had an English teacher who weekly would want us to do creative writing not class, but journaling in order to write something down, get used to writing. And that's when I figured out I really like to try to tell stories. And then jump forward nearly 20 years to the pandemic, and I have a job where I'm just sitting in front of a TV every day, and I had time. And so I put pen to paper.
Wow. Okay, so as a teacher, can we all assemble in your class, like in a teaching world, right? You're working with students and stuff?
I work with students, but I'm not the teacher. Okay. I am the IT guy, and I help facilitate teaching, I guess.
Okay.
I make sure the teachers have all their tools, all the devices, and that they're running, and try my best in what I call a arms race with the students to keep them off of video games.
Okay, so Jordan, you're on your way to a class, and somebody says, "Hey, Jordan, teacher's a little late for this class. It's on storytelling. Can you just jump in the class and just get the class started before the teacher arrives? We just want to talk about storytelling." If you could peek yourself into that room of students eager to learn about storytelling from your love of storytelling, is there anything you would say to a classroom of students about how to tell a great story?
Yes. Yes. I actually got done listening to I like listening to other authors give their opinions. And one thing I think is really important is the payoff and the setup. Okay. So every beginning, you have a setup of what the end's going to be like or what you're expecting to happen. And if kind of pick up on the cues, eventually, you'll sit down and watch a movie and be like, this here's going to happen. Like Chekhov's gun. Do you know the movie Shaun of the Dead?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They show the gun in the bar in the first act. Third act comes and they fire the gun at the zombies. And it's one of those, like, they set it up and then there's a payoff for it.
Yeah.
And any small and big plot line should kind of have that. In that movie, you also see that with Sean and his friendship, even though they twisted and I guess the movie's old, so spoiler, make him a zombie at the end, but they're still friends together. And he is still with the girl and has settled down.
All right.
And so there's those plots at the beginning, and those are the resolution, but they set them up there at the beginning.
So, as someone who enjoys a good story, who else do you look to as a great storyteller, as an author, or from a movie perspective? Who else would you point as to somebody going, this is a great example, from my opinion, of somebody who does story really well?
I would have to say some of the Brandon Sanderson. He's probably the number one fiction writer at the moment, at least in the States.
Yep.
He has also done a lot of classes and seminars and stuff like that. So it's an easy resource to get a hold of and to pick from and go over because they're free on YouTube. I mean, it's hard to beat free.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. And as far as writing then for you, Jordan, is this something you've always wanted to do then, to be a writer?
But a good portion of my life, it's always been one of those dreams that you have in the back of your mind. It's funny how many of those there are in life, and it's one that I try doing, and I got a foot in the door, and now here I am going, kind of feeling like the dog that catches the mailman, and it's going like, oh, what now?
Anybody that's a mailman right now is probably going, hey, wait. Yeah, no, but it's true. It's a good visual. I like that. So, Jordan, how many books do you have right now currently?
I have 2 books available right now. Both of them are part of the same series.
Okay.
They are fantasy noir, so think of hard-boiled detective, but set in a fantasy world, like a full-on secondary world.
Okay. What's some of the key aspects of creating a world around your book and around your writing? Where do you start creating that world, Jordan?
I started with what I could figure out to facilitate like some of the hard-boiled tropes and detective things. Some of those things people would recognize and how to justify or how to put a twist on them. An example I like to give is my main character is addicted to healing potions. He's carrying it around in a flask in his jacket. It's something fantastical, but the fact that it's in a flask and he's a detective kind of calls back to those like old noir detective movies where he's a hard drinker. Thinking of it as an addictive substance, it changes the perception, and they're like, that's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Anything around character development that you've been learning as a writer that has helped you?
Yes. I did have a book about character development and about it discusses trauma and our responses to trauma, a book I read, and it helped me with my character. For example, he is a perfectionist when it comes, not perfectionist, he's very tidy, keeps his clothes clean, he keeps his desk clean, his room clean. But there in the bottom drawer of his desk are a bunch of broken bottles that he poured the potions into his flask from. It's that one part of the life he does not have control over. And so everything else has to like compensate for that part of his life that he doesn't really want to deal with.
Okay. So, Jordan, do you have a drawer like that personally?
I think everyone does.
Yeah,
everyone
so.
has a corner of their mind that they don't really want to engage with. And slowly over the course of books, I'm hoping to have my character deal with it. And, it's one of those things that's got to be pulled out. You got to face it, but it's not a guarantee fix, but it's one thing at a time.
That's an interesting mental picture, Jordan. I think of drawers in my house. You have that junk drawer where everything's in there and everything's important, but you don't need any of it right now. It's just that whole cluttered mess where everything, like you said, everything else could be perfectly organized and neat and everything has its place. But there's this one piece of our life that just seems to be completely not us in the moment. So I love that. That's part of your character.
Another character is Lissa. In the first book, she's a former professor. She's a professor in the first book. Second book, she's the former professor. Okay. She joins up with the detective to start solving cases in the longer book formats, throughout the series. And she goes from being an academic to being more hard boiled. She goes from being this person that, never had really violence in her life to being someone that has to deal with violence and having to deal with violence to them.
Mm. Okay. When you're writing in series, are you writing like book by book and they just seem to fit together? Or do you have this master plan behind the scenes that you're kind of working your way towards?
I have a few plot strings that I would like to hopefully one day see resolved. But otherwise, it's book by book.
Okay.
For example, and I'm trying to make each book very coherent with itself and hopefully coherent with the others. But each one has the characters a start and end of where their life is at that moment.
You want us as readers to read them in order? Does that help us?
To keep with the detective genre, I guess, they can be read in any order because each beginning is going to fill you in just enough to be like, this is his problem. This is what they're dealing with. And at the end, there's a resolution to that, or at least a promise to a greater resolution or a promise to fulfill. Like I'm working on book 3, and of course, the lady, Alyssa, has learned that the detective's drinking is a problem. It's a big problem. And so she's trying to have him face it. And so the book is less about him overcoming it, but facing it. Overcoming it is something that, like with all of us, you got to face it first before you can really overcome it.
I'm on your Blue Handle publishing page for you, Jordan, and I've seen some great comments from other people around your work. What does it mean to you to have people leave comments, give you praise for what you're working on as an author? What does that do for you to hear from people?
It's nice, but honestly, on a personal level, I feel a little bit of a disconnect. I don't know if anyone else gets praise, but then kind of like, oh, thank you. But kind of just, I don't know, let it slide off. I should actually take it to heart more. But I guess the only benefit is I also kind of shrug off the negative comments too.
Okay. Have you learned anything through those negative comments, though, that kind of helped shape you as an author?
Yeah, some of them did mention things, and I do agree with some of them. Like, I'm okay with that self-reflection and being like, I didn't like X, Y, and Z. And I can take apart the book and go, I see what you mean. This could have been a little bit more clear. This could have done a bit more editing. So in some ways, I almost respond better to my negative criticisms
Okay.
than I do my good ones.
Huh. Okay, that's interesting. I like that. I haven't heard that very often. That's interesting.
I know that's a little personal, isn't it?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think because anytime that we create something and put it out in the world, we are subject to people's responses, good or bad, about what we're doing. But the intent there is that we're trying to do our best with what we have, and we're all at different stages of learning and growing. Every book's going to be a little bit easier, a little bit better, right, as we grow. So let's start. Which of the 2 books would you like to talk about first? Book 1? Just kind of go more depth in book 1, do you think?
Yes, I think on some level I did better in book 1 than I did book 2 because I was trying new things in book 2. I think, that's the thing with being creative. If you do new things, you have the risk of it not being as solid as what you're familiar with.
Okay, so let's go through book 1 then. The title of book 1, Jordan.
The Wizard's Brew.
Okay. And now let's give me the high level of for a new reader, first time with your books. They haven't read your work before. What's the big idea for The Wizard's Brew?
It's a murder mystery.
Okay.
The detective is called in to solve the murder of an old friend. The main suspect is his client, his friend's wife.
Okay. Right.
But in any mystery or detective fashion, there's more going on than he first realizes.
And then like the time, location, where is the set?
It's a full-on secondary world, a fantasy setting, and it's kind of equal to that of Victorian England.
Oh,
big industry starting to kick off. The clouds are cloudy because of smoke and chimneys and ashes everywhere. It's basically Victorian England cranked up a dial. It's just a filthy place.
okay. what is the attachment for you as an author to that location?
I was inspired by the just booming technologies along with the familiarity that we get from it from like Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes plays in that setting. And
Mhm.
I thought that's a kind of a fun kind of time area. Let's play with that. We're in an empire that is always at war, always trying to expand. Industry is just now booming. And we're starting to see real impacts of that industry on the environment.
Okay. All right. So that's a good setting for people that are reading. And then for book one for the Wizard's Brew, then explain how the title then matches with where we're going in the book. Why is it the Wizard's Brew?
It's the name of the store owned by his friend. His friend's name is Dennis. He's a potion maker, a alchemist. He makes healing potions, bombs, other things that you would sell for the general populace plus any type of military or mercenary company might want. And he is murdered inside his shop,
Mm,
the Wizard's Brew. So the Wizard's Brew is a location of a significant location within the story itself. I kind of remember when we were first going over it, we were kicking around different names. We One of them was the Moon's Chosen, and some other things were thrown out there, but we settled on the Wizard's Brew.
okay. All right. And from your perspective as the author, what was that moment for you that was the most satisfying in writing the Wizard's Brew? Like what was that for you that just you're like, oh, I'm on to something here. I'm really enjoying this story. What part of the story was it for you that made you really kind of knew you're in the right direction?
I really liked the ending to the Dennis's wife. Uh, she gets revenge for her husband. I mean, I guess that's a spoiler, but
Yeah.
I felt satisfied with how that ended. It's not from her perspective; it's from someone else's perspective on her getting, getting her revenge, her anger out at the force that killed her husband.
At any point in writing The Wizard's Brew, did you feel the characters were kind of leading you as the author at all?
A little bit, yes. I feel like any author probably has a level of discovery writing in them. I did plot some of it, but some of it you get down into the scene itself and you realize what I have planned doesn't work. How these characters interact, how I'm liking them interacting doesn't work. And I'm going to keep writing until I make this feel right.
Okay. All right. Anything else about The Wizard's Brew that we need to know as a reader?
Some people don't like it, some people do, but there's three point of views.
Ooh.
There's the detective's point of view, there's Alyssa's point of view, and then there's Fex. Fex is a gnome. He's an apprentice to the Dennis at the beginning of the story, and he's a second-class citizen.
Mm.
Gnomes are longer lived, but they're usually kept in positions of apprentices for decades, if not generations, because why would you let someone take over when they're going to be better than you to the general population? So that character does deal with racism throughout the story.
So you mentioned that some people don't like this 3-point view for
Point
you.
Yes, some people like just a single point of view.
Okay.
Fantasy, you like multiple points of views, but some people, especially when I'm at book conventions, I've gone to book conventions, they like fewer point of views.
Really?
I think that's more of a genre convention because if you read a lot of detective and mystery stuff, a lot of it's a single point of view. And then some of the epic or giant fantasies, you might get like several different points of views as the book continues on. And so I like multiple points of views. I think it helps facilitate and give the readers like expectations that the characters cannot have. And so when you, the reader, are reading it, you can be like, I think I know what that is. This guy has no way of knowing this, but I know who's the man behind the curtain.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, then they're a little bit more bought into the story as well. So you purposely did not choose a single point of view for this book.
Yes. It's part of the same reason I went with a book for a word limit of 80,000.
Oh.
I was I was looking at genre conventions. The average mystery book is about 60,000 words. The average fantasy and science fiction is about 100,000. And so I purposely met in the middle at 80,000. A lot of mysteries are written in first person, or it's retold in first person, kind of how like Sherlock Holmes is always technically being told by Watson in those stories. That's just kind of a genre convention I've seen. Or you have it very first person where the hard boil, like, the girl came in off the streets. I knew she was trouble, but the moment I saw her. But instead I did it in the more common fantasy of third person limited, where you're in one character's head, but it's not that character who's telling the story.
Did having a word limit, was that hard for you? Like, did you put you in an awkward spot where you had to like end the story in a spot where you didn't feel like you wanted to end, or was it a blessing to have that word limit?
It worked really well for me. Okay. I tend to like things, when I write, I don't get super wordy. In fact, I'm the opposite. It's where I cut until the bare minimum when I'm first writing, and then I have to go back and go, I need more words. I'm allowed to use prose, or I'll go back and be like, I need to make sure I mention like he's walking with his limp in this scene, and just hit consistently details over and over.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. I haven't had a lot of people, Jordan, on the podcast that talk about writing to the limit. They're aware of the limits, but it's kind of like a shot clock in basketball where you got to shoot before the clock runs out. You have this limit that's kind of sitting there in front of you saying, you got to be a little tighter here. You got to bring it in, bring that story in, bring it to a conclusion. It's
funny that you mentioned shot clock. In high school, I did cross country. So to me, that 80,000 words, that's the finish line. That's not my restriction. That's my goal.
Oh, I like how you've just reframed that, Jordan. Very good. That's why you're the writer. I love that. Good. Okay, so Wizard's Brew is out there. Everybody's going to go grab a copy of that, obviously. Now we're going to talk about The Porcelain Promise. Talk about the title of this book and where are we looking at now compared to The Wizard's Brew?
So The Porcelain Promise takes place a few months after the first book. Okay. Alyssa and Zane are working together somewhat as partners, but their exact relationship, I feel like, hasn't been solidified. But they're working together. They are hired to investigate a doctor with a sizable cult following for a product he makes. He makes prosthetic limbs that function way beyond what they should. And everyone's kind of interested in it. People are interested. Is it magical? Is it science? Is it something forbidden? Is it not? Is this the future? And people follow him in almost a cult following because, well, it's not the 21st century with medical care or all sorts of laws on the books to help protect people. It's you get injured, you might be out on the streets. And so having a new limb saves people's practices, their trades, social standing. And so they keep close to this doctor.
Okay, so where did that idea come from for this book?
Honestly, I had early thoughts of Dr. Frankenstein, and it evolved from there.
He's alive. Yeah, I love it.
So there's no reanimation, but Dr. Frankenstein was in the back of my mind the entire time when I was trying to think up this story. This kind of mad scientist, this mad doctor who's trying to develop the perfect cure. Okay.
All right. What does a reader need to know about The Porcelain Promise before they jump into this?
The Porcelain Promise? Ooh. You know, it's funny. I feel like The Wizard's Brew, I had like a very clear thought. For The Porcelain Promise, 3 point of views again, but Fex is no longer one of them. I've developed the habit of the 2 characters that will always be there is Alyssa and Zane, and the third one is whatever's relevant to that story. The third one is not the client, but it's the client's representative. A character who showed up in the first book for like 2 scenes is now the the third voice in the story.
Was that pre-planned between both books?
It was not. I got into the book, I started thinking about it, and I was like, I can reuse this character. And I went with it. I like reusing things because it makes the books feel more interconnected. If you could go back, you could read it by itself and be like, okay, cool. But then when you read another one, oh, that's who that is. They're connected. I introduce a lieutenant in the Guard, kind of like the early police force for this world.
Okay.
And he's going to be a character that will pop in throughout more in other books.
Okay. Is that rewarding for you, Jordan, to go grab a character and go, I'm going to go with this person. I'm going to expand on their world and add them into the next thing I'm working on. Is that rewarding for you?
It is a little bit because it makes it feel to me like a setup and payoff. I can go back and like, oh, I can use this and I can tie it in with this. And it all flows together. One of those where someone might go, you have this all planned. And I go, that's the magic. I didn't, but it flows together.
As long as it looks like that. You're the mad scientist of your books. I love that. What was the most satisfying moment of writing The Porcelain Promise where you pushed yourself back from the desk and went, oh, I love this?
Ooh, I think it's in the third act. Okay. They're at a party because they've been trying to get close to the doctor. He's showing off a prosthetic limb at this big party. And it all falls apart. And the doctor doesn't care. He's like, that failed. Oh, well. And people are injured everywhere. And Zane is there left to help save people and pick up the pieces. And it ties into his background because I've had it written, I think even in the first book, that before he went and was an officer in the military, he was going to medical school. So his first instinct when all these people were injured around him is he stops trying to save them rather than trying to deal with the doctor.
Okay. This is really interesting, Jordan. I love all this. Give us a little bit more of a sneak peek of what's coming, whatever you can tell us without giving anything away. But what's coming next for you in all this journey?
I am working on a third book in this series, and the focus is going to be more of a serial killer type angle, where there's a serial killer on the loose and they're going to try to catch him, except they don't know what they're looking for.
Okay. Do you have a timeline for us as readers on when we can expect something in the future?
Not at this time.
Okay.
I'm about a third of the way done with it.
Okay. All right.
I'm close to 30,000 words, with 80,000 as a goal. That's closer to half than a third. But then it will probably be it'll probably take me a portion of this year to finish it, and then editing and all that, and everything else. So it might be a year and a half before it might come out. And that's just my experience from the first one. And of course, I could be totally wrong, because it could be the company likes it and they're like, let's try get this out. But that is just rough estimates. Something that is interesting about the second one, though, is its name.
Okay.
The first, originally, it wasn't going to be The Porcelain Promise. It was going to be The Body Shop.
Okay.
And that was the name of where the doctor worked out of, The Body Shop. It's kind of a play on words to us reading it. And it was going to be a location, just how the first book was a location. But then later on, late in the whole process, the publisher was like, The Body Shop is a pretty well-used title and name for a lot of businesses. We don't feel like this would be in the best market interest to name it The Body Shop, which I was a little sad, but I was like, I can understand.
Okay.
And so Porcelain Promise was used instead, going off of the fact the limbs were porcelain.
No, that makes sense. I like that.
And so there's almost a science into book naming. I feel like I think it's interesting when people can go through like, this is our reasoning, this is what happened, and this was the final result.
Talk about working with Blue Handle. Like, talk about that amazing team and kind of how they support authors. What's been your experience?
They've always been open to any questions, concerns, and I was told them like, hey, I'm free is any events coming up? And in 2 months from now, I'm going to be at a local Comic-Con. And so they do look for opportunities and everything else. I have been with them, since the pandemic, which some days feels like yesterday and other days feels like 1,000 years ago. And it's been interesting. They've taken on a lot of authors, and I think that's amazing. I've seen them go from 1 or 2 authors to several now, and with more coming out.
Good.
They are always rapidly growing, it looks like to me. And I'm always amazed by all the hard work they put in.
Excellent. It's nice to have a team that believes in you too as an author and supports what you do, gives you direction where they feel it might be better for you to kind of go that word out. The name of your book, for example. Any of that kind of feedback is just going to make you as an author better. So I love having a team around you that really wants to see you succeed as an author as well.
Yes, and they're okay with editorial differences. I remember at the end of the first book, the editor suggested this character being killed, and instead I angled it where a different character saves them, and they read it over and they're like, no, I like how it connects to this character better than how I would have done it. They said their preference in writing would have made it darker, but for everything else, how I did it, they thought was better. So we didn't go with the original, but I took the input and I was like, well, let's change it a little bit this direction.
Good. See, that's good. That's good feedback. That's good for you as an author too, because it opens your mind to maybe some other perspectives and some other options for your book. I love that.
Yes.
Excellent. Jordan, so for people listening to you today and they're going to go buy both books and eagerly anticipating book number 3 in the future, where do you want to send a reader so they can reach out to you? Maybe they want you at their Comic-Con. They want you to come and set up a table and talk about your books, or they just want to meet you and continue the conversation. Where would we like to send people so they can be in touch with you?
I can be found on Instagram and Facebook, and I just recently got into Threads, and which I think is like the Twitter version of Instagram. It's like that branch, the kind of branching off. I can be found on those 3. I go by the handle author Jordan Reed on all 3 of them. And I'm pretty sure it's the same profile picture across everything too.
Good. We'll make sure I have links for that and your books in the show notes so everybody can come and follow you and follow your journey as an author. I'm excited that we have time with you, Jordan. I know you have a busy day today and you've kind of given us some space to do this. I really appreciate that.
I would have been happy to give more, just how I don't know, you planned, it's the rule of life. What is Murphy's Law? Anything that can go wrong does go wrong. Yeah. And anytime you have something planned, something else happens. It's almost like magnetism. You pick a day and like, we'll do this day. And everything in the world gravitates to that day. And you look at it and go, I was free for 2 straight weeks. And how is everything right there?
Yeah. Well, I know you have to run, Jordan. Thank you so much for being a part of this, taking time to share your story as an author. We love supporting authors, and we love my challenge to the readers listening. When they buy your books, buy one for yourself, buy one for someone else, but also leave an amazing review so more people will know about Jordan, know about these great books, these great characters, these great stories, so that we can sell more books for Jordan. That's the main idea of doing this podcast, so that we can get more people into your community that know and love you and can't wait for book 3, and they're cheering you on as a reader. So Jordan, again, thank you so much for making time to do this. Really appreciate you kind of adding us to your day. It's awesome to have you here.
Thank you so much. And seriously, thank you so much for having me on. Sorry I had to step away for a minute there. Thank you so much for everything.
Excellent. Everybody, all the information is always in the show notes. Go there. Make sure you check out Jordan. Go follow him on Instagram. Go follow him on Facebook and Threads. Make sure that he knows that you heard his episode here on Living the Next Chapter, and send him some love. Make sure you buy copies of his book. Buy them both. Get them right now. Go there and grab them. And again, leave a great review, Jordan. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for being here for the Living the Next Chapter podcast. So glad to have you as part of our family of listeners. There's a seat for you just here on Living the Next Chapter, and I'm so happy that you have listened to all the way to the end, wow, you are now my new bestie. I want to let you know that I host 7 other podcasts on top of Living the Next Chapter. Yep, 8 total. One of them is called the How To Podcast series. If you are thinking, you know what, Dave, this podcast thing seems like a lot of fun, well, I'll give you a secret. It is. It's a great, amazing, fun time where you can get to meet great people, get your word out there, promote your book, promote with your coaching program, whatever you're doing. Podcasting is great. And if you want to learn how to do this, what you're hearing right now, head over to howtopodcast.ca and look up the How to Podcast series on YouTube, whatever app you're listening on. You'll find me there. And I'd love for you to come listen to how to do this. And if you're interested and have questions on how to podcast, reach out to me at howtopodcast.ca. Thank you for listening. Talk soon.